I brought a ton of different kind of foraging toys, things that I have around for my flock. Foraging is extremely important even in captivity. Out in the wild, they would be using foraging to find nesting spots, find resources, mentally stimulate themselves out there trying to survive. In captivity, we are a little bit more lackadaisy. Obviously, they don't have predators. They're not having to go look for food. So we want to mimic that same natural instinct to forage into captivity so that they are mentally stimulated and they are fulfilling that need to want to do these things. Foraging is one of my favorite activities to give my birds. Keeps them busier longer. It's super easy for me to put together. I brought a whole bunch of different stuff. We'll start with my first favorite foraging activity. I will call them foraging trays, which the title kind of makes it self-explanatory. This one has had better days. They've definitely chewed it up some. Any kind of box that's short. The only thing that you want to watch out about foraging trays in themselves is that some birds will kind of get the nesty vibe from them, and you don't want that. I usually use foraging trays for an activity, and then I don't leave it in their enclosure. I'll leave it out in their play areas where they go visit it. With this one, you can see I just have a whole bunch of random wood chips in here. They have chewed up and made pretty much little like wood shavings in here. But you can add anything to foraging trays, and that's the fun thing about them. I frequently just throw in broken toy parts that they can't use anymore on their actual toys. You can throw in treats in there. With treats, though, I do try to make sure that I clean it out after every time I put food in there because we don't want unwanted pests around the house. And then you can throw in, like, one of my favorite things, crinkle paper. Birds go nuts for crinkle paper. You can throw in stuff like this one is a smaller foraging tray. I made this one out of a food to-go container, and it's got decorative rocks in there. You do want to make sure that the rocks are rocks that are hard enough that the birds cannot chip off parts. And then I would not use the rocks for any birds that are big enough to pick them up. These ones are fairly small rocks, but I use these ones for my parrots, which are tiny birds, kind of like budgies, that are not going to be picking up these rocks. They're not going to be throwing them all over the place. They're not going to be able to get them really in their mouth to try to chew them up. What I love about this for a foraging tray is you put a really thin layer of the little pebbles on there. They kind of have to move them around to get to the seeds underneath it. Makes it super easy to wash these rocks. And then it's a little bit of effort for them because the rocks are kind of heavy compared to a 30-gram little bird. So it's using a lot of muscle to move these around, which my parrots seem to absolutely love these. Again, I would use this for parrots that are super small, like budgies, parrots, lovebirds would probably love this. Just you want to monitor the pebbles. If you see them picking them up, if they're chewing on the rocks that you decided to use, definitely remove them because you don't want them to ingest anything that they can't digest, obviously. Another thing that I really love is these buckets. This is a huge bucket. It's like the size of my head. This would be great for bigger birds. I actually use this for my red-bellied parrot. He's not a huge bird, so like medium-sized birds would also benefit from this size bucket. But this is, again, just technically a foraging tray, but in a bucket style. They cannot ruin this. This is actually, I think, a dog bowl. It's got flat on one side, so it could just lean up against his cage. I just throw in random broken toy parts in here, and he absolutely goes crazy for it. Like any foraging item, you do want to make sure, again, they're not using this as a nesting material area. I've never seen him have any interest in acting like it's a nest for him. So I do leave this in his cage all the time. Macaws and stuff, they obviously are not going to be able to fit in this. That works really well. And then for the littler birds, I have found these awesome little buckets. They are small enough where no bird's going to be able to treat this kind of like a nest. But this acts exactly the same way. You would just fill it with whatever toys, wood pieces you have and throw it in there. Add some treats at the bottom and they can go dig and forage around in there. And again, it's stainless steel. Awesome. I will be adding these little buckets to my website. I will be adding like foraging stuff in there, so it's preset for you guys in the near future. And then if you don't have one of these fancy buckets, you could just get a bowl. Like their food bowl, you can put an extra food bowl in their enclosure, add it with the same stuff, whatever you want, and throw it in there, and acts exactly the same way as a bougie little tin bucket. And then you can go with more of the fancier, I've seen these and I've bought a couple of them. You can go with more fancy, elaborate kind of foraging toys. Like this one's got these little cups all around it. It's got these PVC pipes, so tricky birds that like to break chains hopefully won't break it. But with this, you would fill up these little containers. You would fill them up with whatever you want to. Again, this one I usually use crinkle paper in it because it's pretty small little containers. And then this lid technically goes over it, and the bird has to move it out of the way so it can actually get the treats inside. It's really easy forager, kind of a basic forager for some birds. There are a whole bunch of them that are extremely elaborate, where they have to turn gears and do all this crazy stuff so that they can get their treats. These are really fun. I definitely recommend kind of working your way up, because if you just give a bird something that's super complex and you don't work with them on it, they may never figure it out and it may just be sitting in their cage. You can use toys technically as foragers. You could buy just kind of chewy up kind of stuff. Like this one is a new toy that I will be adding onto my website. It's technically not built as a forager, but it still instills the same kind of behavior. It's got little tiny corkscrews drilled into this and kind of stuff so they can pick at it like they normally would out in the wild. It's very soft material, lots of different textures that will allow them to have that same behavior of picking at stuff, feeling different textures. There's harder textures on here, soft textures. This is mainly for busy beaks, just birds that like to pick at stuff. I wouldn't recommend this for really heavy chewers because they would probably demolish it in like 3 seconds. But this was built for my canary wing, my white winged parakeet. He is very dainty with his chewing, but he loves to get into mischief. So this was his little toy that I tested it out on him, and he has picked it to death. He absolutely loves this one. He doesn't really like to chew on heavy wood, so this one is soft enough for him to want to keep busy with it. There's other toys out there like this. This one's again is from my toy line that has like cork bark on it. As you can see, these cork bark pieces have a ton of natural little grooves and stuff in them. You can easily poke treats inside of there that will keep them busy. They'll start picking at it. So if they're not naturally a chewer, that will instigate them to want to chew on things. And then there's these little pods, but these pods are technically hollow inside. This one I've obviously put crinkle paper in there, but you can stuff treats in there and they'll start digging around at that. Then they'll want to chew on the wood to kind of get it out of the way. You can even modify this toy a little bit more by drilling little tiny holes in the pine and adding more treats inside the pine, kind of like Swiss cheese it up kind of thing, and then add a whole bunch of little stuff inside. These are all tricks kind of to get your bird to actually want to play with toys too, because a lot of birds are more food motivated, and then that food motivation will cause them to want to investigate the textures, chew the texture to get out of the way of its treat that it wants. This is again another toy from my toy line, but this toy right here has finger traps on it. Finger traps are on a ton of different kind of bird toys, and they're awesome because they allow you to stuff stuff inside of the holes of the finger traps, so you can put more little tiny like textures in there that they can pick out. Then you can always put treats inside of them. I a lot of times will fish treat in the woven part on the outside. That'll cause birds to start picking at it. And then these cardboard boxes that are on here, these little cute things that look like this. These are great too. They look like very basic. Oh, that's nothing cool. The bird won't like that. No, the birds love these because one, the texture is super soft, obviously. And then you could poke as many holes as you want in this. So you could just shove whatever you want in there. And that layer of extra stuff in there incites them to just start picking at it, looking at it, figuring out, hey, if I see one of these, maybe there's something really cool in it. So maybe I should investigate. All cardboard boxes and fun stuff like that. Sometimes you could do super basic stuff too. Like again, if you get a food bowl and you put their normal food in there, you could put a piece of paper over it and just kind of loosely put it over it, so they can't see their food, but you poke little holes in it and they have to investigate through the paper or around the paper in order to get their food. Foraging does not have to be difficult. It is the most basic, easy thing that you can put together for your bird. You want to put it at different levels for your bird. One thing you do want to look for when using foraging, like materials or toys, investigate it often to see if anything has been broken to the point where it could cause harm. 2, you want to make sure that there are no nesting behaviors that are being brought up from having these things around them. Like my sun conure, if I put a foraging tray in her enclosure, she instantly gets into nesting mode. She will lay eggs even though she doesn't have a mate. So I want to not have that happen. I want to prevent that from happening. So I always allow her to play with foraging trays outside of her enclosure, nothing ever inside of her enclosure. If you do put anything over their normal food, that it's not so difficult that they don't understand that their food is under there. Sometimes birds don't know how to forage right away. So you kind of have to help them along. Like maybe put their bowl of food in there, have the paper that you're going to put over it, show them putting it over there so that they kind of get the idea, hey, my food is under there. I need to move that paper to do it. And then you slowly but surely make that foraging a little bit harder. But if you give them their food with the cover over it, they're never going to understand, hey, where's my food? This girl's never giving me my food. I'm starving to death. So you want to work up to things. Get creative with it. Each bird likes something different. Some birds may be intimidated by stuff right away. You just want to experiment with it. Have fun with it. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be bougie. Just add stuff in a box. Let your bird go to town. That's the basics of foraging.